Hello everyone. Our topic today is on how to build a comprehensive industrial cybersecurity program. I will shed the light on the recent attacks in the industrial realm, especially in Q1 and Q2 of 2021. We will as well discuss what is the Ransomware Cartel, and then we'll move to discuss the driving factors of the ICS, in addition to the OT concerns and the current ICS threat landscape. I will then share with you some tips on how to build a comprehensive ICS cybersecurity program, and we'll wrap up with some recommendations and advices. To be honest, in 2020, the industrial community performed amazing feats to keep the civilization running under the challenging circumstances of the COVID pandemic. And as a result, many organizations shifted in how they conduct business to include an increasingly connected industrial environment. So if you're operating from a connected industrial environment, I hope you take some practical advices and takeaways out of this presentation. Taking this into consideration, the trend goes on and cyber attacks keep on coming with no end in sight. During the last 10 years, billions of US dollars were spent on ransomwares and attacks. So these cyber attacks exist and will exist in the digital space, but today they are having a real and tangible effect on the physical world. I'll not go into the details on each of the attacks from 2012 till 2021. I'll just shed the light on the two recent attacks, the Oldsmar, Florida, and the Colonial pipelines. In February, a hacker gained access to the water system of Florida, and they attempted to pump in a dangerous amount of chemicals. Oldsmar water treatment plant falls under the umbrella of critical infrastructure. And by critical infrastructure, we mean that those facilities that facilitate economy and public safety as well as public health. This attack has been caught between two famous attacks, the December SolarWinds, the famous one of the supply chain, and the more recent exploitation of zero-day vulnerabilities of Microsoft Exchange Server. So it can be easy to forget about such attack, but this is very important for the industrial community. Because if this attack was successful, the damages of this attack would have been catastrophic. But luckily, the plant operator were able to detect the unauthorized changes of the sodium hydroxide levels immediately. The regular amount of sodium hydroxide is usually 100 parts per million, but the attackers tried to pump 11,100 parts per million. So imagine the repercussions of such an attack. The intruders gained access to the industrial system through TeamViewer, which was installed on several computers and shared remote access passwords. So these computers were all connected to the internet without a firewall protection, and all of these computers were directly connected to the SCADA system. On top of that, these computers were using the unsupported Windows 7 operating system. So as you can see, this is a very basic attack compared to previous ones, such as the Ukrainian blackout in 2015, where the malware used at that time would compromise a single SSH key that would give access to the attackers, that would give access to the root and mission critical systems to the attacker. So it's the same level of access the attackers had here, but the initial attack vector was very basic and very easy. Now let us move to another attack on critical infrastructures that took place in May of 2021. A ransomware gang took the US fuel pipeline off Colonial pipeline, and Colonial pipeline paid the ransom on May 7th due to uncertainty over how long the shutdown would continue. And these amounts were paid, of course, in bitcoins or Monero. So what would have been the case here? So it's more likely that hackers gained access to Colonial computer systems through the administrative side of the business. An employee might have been tricked into downloading some malware, for example, and the rest is history. So what do we learn from these recent attacks? We learn that sometimes the initial attack vector is very simple. We learn that ransomware gangs are maturing more and more. And we also learn that when there is a critical public service on the line, there is more chance that the ransom will be paid. And ransomware gangs are relying on this fact. All right, so due to the exploding digital transformation that is happening in the recent years to the critical national infrastructure, there is a path these days for attackers to run from spoofed email in an email inbox all through the critical gas compressor, turbines, you name it. It's your crown jewels in the industrial environment. On the screen here, you can see the kill chain of Ryuk, which has been there since 2018, and it has compromised governments, healthcare, and manufacturing facilities. So following a trickbot infection and the identification of an interesting target, the Ryuk gang deploys post-exploitation framework such as Cobalt Strike or PowerShell or Metapredator or Metasploit. And these tools will allow them to perform malicious actions on computers without triggering any security alert. So the Ryuk attackers also use many open source tools to steal credentials stored on compromised computers such as Mimikast and Lazan. They also use a famous tool called Bloodhound. This tool allows them to analyze and reveal potentially exploitable relationships that exist in Active Directory environments. The end goal of this attack is to identify the domain controller and gain administrator access to them. Subsequently, this will give them access and power over the entire network. And once you have that, and once you have the link between the employee inbox or the network to the critical or crown jewels, the rest is history. But it's not always a malware, because valid accounts such as compromised accounts and default credentials may as well grant an adversary increased privilege to specific systems and devices, or they can grant them as well access to restricted areas of the network. So adversaries may choose not to use malware or any tools that can be noisy on the network in conjunction with legitimate access they have for those credentials. And this legitimate access makes it harder for defenders to detect and to control. So valid accounts is the most common TTP used in 2020. As we said earlier, shared credentials and poor security parameters allow adversaries to leverage valid accounts and gain persistent access to remote ICS. Now, the ransomware cartel, as weird as it may sound, arose in May 2020, and Twisted Spider, the gang behind Maze ransomware and others, is said to be the group that initiated its creation. Their primary motivation was financial gain. But these ransomware groups, they not only share data and victim data among them, they share tactics, they share command and control centers and infrastructure, and they make packages available to other criminals through ransomware as a service. So imagine now we have ransomware as a service. Affiliated gangs have claimed to be part of this cartel at some point in time in the past, but Some of them are denying such connections, but evidences contradict this. Now, could these attacks have been avoided? I think yes, because the simplest way to protect an OT technology or a critical infrastructure is to keep it offline and air-gapped with no link at all to any network and no link at all to the internet. So it's as easy as it may sound. But the air-gapping thing is currently a myth. Why? Because it is becoming harder for business to operate in an air-gapped environment, as they are increasingly relying on connected devices to improve their efficiencies. So air-gapping is actually a security by separation concept rather than a security by design. And these days we have introduced IoTs and IIoTs components to ICS systems, which is making them more vulnerable to attacks. Especially that change tends to happen slowly in ICS networks compared to IT networks, which makes it difficult for OT to keep up with IT. So the conclusion here is that connected OT is a given and air gap is not applicable anymore. The explosion of IoT and IIoT use cases offer endless opportunities and efficiencies to the business, but also increased the risk. As you can see here, the IoT architecture or model is full of security weaknesses from the data level up to the mobile application level. Now, let's move to part 2 of this webinar and let's discuss what is driving the OT market. And let us see why air gap is a myth. Digital transformation is the adoption of digital technology to transform services or businesses. This is a hype word these days, and I'm sure that you're bumping into this term every now and then. Business needs real-time information, and this is a reality. So digital transformation is one of the main driving factors of the OT market. Now, bringing IT and OT together has endless opportunities and challenges. We cannot lift and shift enterprise security controls to OT directly because industrial controllers are built with no security in mind. We know that IT-OT convergence is happening, but it has many challenges accompanying it. Exploring IoT, as per Gartner, it says that 25 billion devices of IoT and IIoT will be connected by the end of 2021. So as you can see, we have 3 main drivers that are shaping the OT market. Now, I will not go into the details of the difference between IT and OT, but I want to tell you that IT is not OT. Critical environments cannot afford to fail. An operational outage of even a few seconds when public safety is at stake is not tolerable. So, what do we need to do? We need to build in cyber resilience so that critical systems can resist and even fight back against cyber attacks. The famous CIA Triad is totally inverted when we are operating in an OT environment because availability is our main concern, and then comes the integrity and confidentiality of data. The operating environment of the equipment in OT is totally different than IT. This is one of the main concerns. And under many circumstances, we use ruggedized items. Additional concerns when it comes to the OT is that it is uncommon to have a dedicated ICS staff or cybersecurity staff for your OT or ICS environment. Usually the IT guy or the responsible person for IT wears the two hats. Now, recently researchers have identified several third-party vulnerabilities in the software supply chain that impacted ICS systems. The commercial name for these vulnerabilities are Ripple 20 and Amnesia 33. So there is currently many vulnerabilities in the third-party IP stack that is being used by many embedded products. So when it comes to ICS, what is impacted? Many devices. We have PLCs impacted, serial to Ethernet converters, protocol converters, remote terminal units, digital protective relays, and some managed switches and managed routers. On top of that, the classic concerns when it comes to the OT can as well be projected to OT. So the classical IT challenges when it comes to known vulnerabilities and the malware of USB malware, etc., can now be projected on the IT. That's on top of memory corruption issues, which I'm moving now to in this slide. As you can see here, memory corruption issues continue to present the largest percentage of new vulnerabilities described in ICS and advisories. And we expect that situation to continue as the software stacks of, many ICS assets lack intrinsic security and receive limited security oversight. Now let's move to the Cornerstones challenge we have in an OT environment. This is based actually on a research that has been done by Dragos company. They found out that 90% of their clients, they have limited or no visibility into their ICS environment. Many customers only monitored the IT to OT boundary without actually monitoring the activity inside the ICS network. So in many cases, when they're investigating in an incident, network analysts were blind to critical network traffic. So having a visibility into the OT network is a prerequisite, and it's a critical step for developing a full picture that occurs across industrial assets and sites. Knowing your assets in the OT environment, as well as monitoring what is happening inside when it comes to the network traffic. Now, the notable threat landscape currently outstanding can be viewed here on this slide, and some threats may proliferate into disruptive and destructive capabilities, especially supply chain and ransomware. Ransomware is very critical here because it's particularly active and it's hitting valuable companies left and right, extorting them for financial gains. Now let's move on the recommendations on how to build a comprehensive ICS cybersecurity program. So compared to previous years, the regulatory spectrum, especially in the Gulf area and the Middle East, is becoming more and more mature. We have an international, in addition to local and regional standards / frameworks / regulations that came into life. So whenever you're building your ICS program or cyber program, I advise you to take this into consideration. Now, to build a program, you need the governance umbrella, which is mentioned, which has been mentioned in the previous slide. We have many regulatory decisions, frameworks, standards, etc. So this should be the overarching umbrella. Under that, you need to implement a tactical framework. And what is better than the MITRE ATT&CK for ICS framework to implement? This framework provides a map for TTPs that are commonly used by adversaries. So if you understand those techniques, you will have actionable insights on how to defend your environment. Furthermore, this framework can provide us with a common language that we can use among us to communicate and effectively analyze incidents. On top of that, having a common reference point for all the industry experts can be useful to enhance your organizational security strategies and policies. So how to address the main OT challenge of asset visibility and network visibility? Well, there are some products out there that offer these features. They offer network visibility, they offer threat detection, and they offer operational insight. And this can go hand in hand with the digital transformation and the business modernization. So implementing such solutions will enable your cybersecurity team to deeply monitor the OT environment and create specific use cases to quickly react on suspicious activities happening or targeting the OT environment. As well, IT and OT teams will be able to confidently secure the OT environment and detect cyber risks as well as mitigate them. And finally, this can enable and prepare for the convergence between IT and OT, which will actually become a reality because it will be easier to manage both environments and to proactively know what is happening there. So, all right. So why companies are not at that stage of implementing such solutions of asset inventory and vulnerability management and network insights and operational insights? Because usually companies, they do not react before a breach. This is an unfortunate situation. So you need a breach, you need a regulation by the government, or you need a mandate by the C-level to react. So 60%, this is as per a study by Nozomi, 60% of the companies are still at this stage. 30% of the companies have started with a POC of a certain product. They know the vulnerabilities they have in their OT environment and they started taking some actions to remedy those vulnerabilities and to close on the risks. 10% or the remaining companies are at the optimization phase. They have a centralized SOC, they are at the level of orchestration when it comes to security, they have a centralized SIM, and they are, in the optimal or optimization phase. Now, mainly, this sums it all when it comes to building a comprehensive ICS cybersecurity program. Threats can be mitigated through a well-maintained defense in-depth strategy. This is like a rule of thumb. So each domain here, from the data up to the physical, must be carefully assessed before relevant security controls can be implemented at your organization. And the most important factor is the governance aspect. You can see down the employees' awareness, the policies, procedures, and having a good and tested incident response plan, as well as business continuity plan. Now, since our focus is on the OT, let us zoom into the technical controls that can be implemented in an OT network. As you can see, we have Purdue model on the screen, level 0 up to level 4/5. You know that convergence is happening at many levels, not only the network. It's happening at the application, OS, personnel, etc. You can implement security technologies even at level 0. Like, these technologies work at the electrical signal and will help detect process anomalies as well as cyber threat and security threats to critical infrastructure. You can as well use sensor data integrity to validate the data that is being generated by the sensors. You can as well use data diodes to control the traffic and the direction of the traffic. Vulnerability management, or like ICS vulnerability management system, are the tools that we've been talking about. They will help you collect in a real-time fashion your industrial assets, as well as give you a visibility of what's happening in the OT network, up to the stack of having a penetration testing performed by a third party. And yes, you can have end-to-end encryption in an OT environment. So I will wrap up this webinar by having, or like suggesting, some actions that need to be done. Governments need to take urgent actions to prevent the ransoms being paid in secret. We don't want to feed the birds, right? So we want to stop this trend of paying the ransom in secret. We cannot beat those ransomware gangs individually, so we need to share insights. We need to have increased OT network visibility. So visibility includes network monitoring, logging, and of course, identifying and prioritizing your crown jewels. So asset and inventorying is a prerequisite. We need as well to segregate our network access to ensure that employees are only given access to the systems that they need. Putting different systems on different networks that are only accessible by the group of employees that need them is important to ensure that if there is a breach, less systems will be compromised. We need to use VPN technologies with MFA. We also need to focus on boosting our incident response capabilities. Incident response plans are mainly there in many organizations, but it underestimates the ICS efforts that need to be in place. So my last advice is for corporate security, cybersecurity teams to go there, walk out of their offices, go to the plants, understand the process, learn the language of the OT people, and build relationship with them to help you solve future issues. What can I say as a final word? I will say that if companies fail to commit to cybersecurity, those gangs and those bad actors will become repeat customers.